صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. Peace and blessings be upon you, يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ولي الله. السلام عليك يا حجة الله. السلام عليك يا أخ رسول الله. السلام عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا علي بن أبي طالب ورحمة الله وبركاته. Peace be upon you, O proof of Allah. Peace be upon you, O you who was chosen by Allah. Peace be upon you, O brother of Rasulullah. Peace be upon you, Ya Ali ibn Abi Talib. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fast, accept your a'mal, accept your salat, accept all of what you've done in this month. My brothers and sisters, we are very close to the end, and inshallah ta'ala, the month of Ramadan played its role and has molded us together collectively and also as individuals in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended Shahr Ramadan to do. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who seek knowledge in this month, and inshallah, by the grace of God, we are from those that gain some knowledge from these lectures that our brothers at Mainstay are putting on. I will tell you just, as from my opinion and my personal opinion, that the content that's being put out there by the brothers that are, speaking very, very rich content. So, if you get bored of me in the last few days, check some of their workout, and you won't be disappointed, inshallah ta'ala. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Jameel. So yesterday we discussed the idea of moon sighting, and we discussed the general rule, the golden rule behind moon sighting, and what more or less is the fundamental behind moon sighting in Shia fiqh and Shia jurisprudence. And we said that the moon must be seen with the naked eye. For you to consider the first day of Shahr Ramadan or the first day of Shawwal, essentially Eid, you must see the moon with the naked eye. So calculations of any sort to tell you that the moon is born according to our jurisprudence is not accepted. Astronomical data of any sort, astronomy or astronomers' opinions on when the moon is you're able to see it, or when the moon is born, etc., is not to be taken. And we said, my brothers and sisters, that we are not intending to stir up any controversy by discussing this. Rather, every person go back to the marja that they follow, and let's put this issue to rest. And I believe all of us can agree that there are more important issues in the Shia world that surpass this. The notion, well, I'm going to fast one day more than you, or we're not going to have Eid on the same day. When the fact of the matter is, we've been having different Eids, my brothers and sisters, for the past 1,000 years. As in, when you go to our villages in Lebanon and villages in Iraq, villages in Iran, etc., Najaf, Qom, even the major hubs of Shia Islam, they have 3 days of Eid anyway. And so let's put this issue to rest. And let's move forward, right? And that's more or less the goal that we intended to get to yesterday. And in doing so, we looked at some of the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam that pinpoint and make it clear that the moon must be seen with the naked eye. And we said, if you go to Wasa'il al-Shia, the alim, the blessed author, puts down 28 different riwayat that use the word ar-ru'ya, must be seen with the eye, with the naked eye. And then he also looks at riwayat and presents riwayat that come and tell us you are not allowed to use mathematical calculations, nor the opinions of astronomers in pinpointing the beginning of the Shar'i month. Jameel. Tonight, my brothers and sisters, we're going to add on what we discussed. But we're going to ask a question that you all ask, and every one of us asks. And it's a good question. It's a correct question. It's not a question just to stir up debate. No, it's a real question. The question is this. If the riwayat are so clear and very, very straightforward about when the beginning of the month is supposed to be, or the method by which you pinpoint the beginning of the month, why is there a difference of opinion between our scholars on this issue specifically? I can give you a general answer. And say, well, generally speaking, the ulama will differ in opinion on issues because one alim's opinion from what he understood from the riwayat differs from the other alim's opinion about his understanding of the riwayat. Sure, that's the general opinion, or that's the general answer to the question that you're posing. But in this specific issue, why is there such a difference of opinion? Where does it sprout from? If the riwayat are so clear about a person having to see the moon, about not being allowed to use mathematics and other opinions, or opinions of astronomers rather, where does the difference of opinion sprout from? Number one. Number two, when it comes to those who are bearing witness that they saw the moon, what are the conditions of that testimony? We say that if somebody testifies that they saw the moon in certain circumstances, according to certain conditions, you can take their word and you don't necessarily have to see the moon for yourself. So what are those conditions? How is it that we know that the moon was seen? What are the conditions that were outlined by the Sharia itself? So inshallah, we're going to answer these two questions bi'awnillah ta'ala. Before we begin, we're going to have a lot of salat ala Muhammad wa ala. Jameel. So where does the difference of opinion come from? I want you right now to visualize with me. Visualize with me and listen to what I'm saying very, very closely. You right now are in Dearborn, let's say, and I'm right now in Windsor. Between us, there's about 20 minutes away. There's 20 minutes distance. Jameel. So we can safely say that my patch of sky and your patch of sky is essentially the same. Essentially the same. Make that example or that point clear? No problem. Let's say you, right now, you're sitting at home. Yes? And you have your next door neighbor who's also a Muslim as well, Shia, looking up at the sky to see the moon. You go up on your balcony, you go up to the top floor of your house, you look up to where the moon is supposed to be in the sky, and you see the moon. Yes? Jameel. Can you safely say that if your neighbor went up in his or her home, which is just next door, and looked up at the same place, they will see the moon as well? Yes. Absolutely. No problem. Put your neighbor that's next door aside for now. Let's say you have a neighbor that's just down the street. Down the street. So you'd say maybe 200 meters away, 200 yards away. You look up at the sky and you see the moon. Can you safely say that if they looked up at the sky from that place, which is just 200 more yards away, 200 meters away, they look up at the sky in the same place, they will see the moon as well? Yes. Last example. You're in the same city. You live in one area of the city. Let's say you live on the west side of the city, and your brother lives on the eastern side of the city. And let's assume that your city is small, like Windsor. Small like Windsor, maybe 40 kilometers across. You're in one place of the city, and your brother is in the other place in the same city. You look up at the sky and you see the moon. Can you safely say that if your brother on the other side of the city looked up at that same exact place, they will see the moon as well? Yes. Jameel. Jameel. Last one. Stay with me. I know you guys are saying, okay, Ahmad, too much examples. No, they're not. Because I'm going to ask you now this last question. You see the city in Dearborn, in the US. Somebody in California also is let's say your brother lives in California. They're also trying to see the moon. You see the moon in Dearborn. Can you safely say that if they look up at the sky in California, they will see the moon as well? Now you're questioning. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So what is that fundamental factor? What is that factor that essentially will differentiate between you being able to see the moon as compared to someone else at the same time trying to see the moon or not? As in, what is that fundamental factor that links your sight with someone else's sight of the moon? Do you see the question? What is that fundamental factor that draws the connection between you living in Dearborn and someone else in which if you see the moon, they will also see the moon? What's that factor that plays a role? Distance. Distance. Yes? We said if it was your neighbor, no problem. What you see is what they're going to see. If it was somebody 200 meters away, what you see is what they'll see. Someone at the other side of the city, what you see is what they'll see. Someone in California, you said, I don't know. Right? So the fundamental factor was distance. Jameel. We call that distance. We call that distance in fiqhi terms. You can understand it as al-ufuq. Al-ufuq, the horizon. The horizon. Why you and your neighbor were able to see the same thing in the sky is because essentially you share the same patch of sky. You share the same horizon. You share the same horizon. Why you doubted between you and someone in California, you didn't doubt if that person was looking in the same direction. No, they were looking in the same direction. We assume that we're all looking in the same direction. You didn't doubt if that person didn't have the necessary tools to see, or his eyesight or her eyesight wasn't good enough. No, the issue that made you doubt was merely the distance, the horizon. Are you both in the same horizon? Jameel. Jameel. When it comes to the difference of opinion between ulama, it's about the issue of horizon, the horizon. What is considered to be the adequate distance between 2 points to the degree where we can safely say that the sight, seeing the moon, and this one means you will ultimately see the moon in the other place. What is that distance? What is that radius or diameter, essentially? That if you see the moon in one place, within that circle, you should see the moon as well in the other place, as long as it falls in that circle. What's that circle? What's that distance between the 2 points? That is where the difference of opinion sprouts from. Some ulama rather, made the circle small, meaning between me and you in Dearborn, there's 20 minutes away, we fall on the same ufuq, we fall on the same horizon. But between me and someone in Australia, we don't fall on the same horizon. Between me and someone in England, we don't fall on the same horizon. We have different horizons. Then there are those ulama that came and said, no, the diameter is much greater, much bigger. So if you see it in Windsor, then the person in England can break their fast according to your eyesight, or according to what you saw, not your eyesight, according to what you saw, according to your testimony, according to your sight, meaning your sight and his sight are one and the same. They say that there is a mulazamah between the two sights, between the two testimonies, between you two witnessing the sky. And the only reason that this person didn't see it was because of clouds, because let's say the atmosphere, the humidity, etc. Many different factors that play a role. But as long as you saw it and you guys are within that same diameter, the same horizon, they can break their fast as well. This is where the difference of opinion comes from. Before we delve into the different opinions and the different ulama that hold different opinions, let's find where Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam spoke about this and how you yourselves, my brothers and sisters, can see where the difference comes from and how the riwayah was very vague, or the riwayat, the two that I'm going to read, are a little vague about that distance itself. But they do say you can take from the testimony of someone else in another city. But they don't tell you the distance between them. At least in these riwayat. طبعا, I'm not a mushtahid, and I'm not going to be opening this bahat myself, because I'm not at that level whatsoever. But more or less, again, to present the riwayat for you and for the barakah, inshallah ta'ala. So go to also, we're going to Wasa'il al-Shia, volume 10, page 254. We have riwayah number 9. Look what it says. Riwayah number 9. Look what it says. It says, عن عبد الرحمن ابن أبي عبد الله, one of the companions. He narrates. He says, سألت أبا عبد الله. I asked Imam الصادق عليه السلام عن هلال شهر رمضان يغم علينا في 29 من شعبان. He says, it's 29th of Sha'ban, ya Imam. And we look up and we don't see the moon in the sky. What do we do? فقال لا تصم إلا أن تراه. Do not fast until you see it. طيب. Or فإن شهد أهل بلد آخر فقده, or فقده. You yourself, your taklif in the moment is, if you don't see it, don't start fasting with the intention that it's Shahr Ramadan. طيب. Later on, if you found out that another city, another place saw the moon, then remake that day, then redo that day, then do qada for that day that you missed. Why? Because back then they weren't able to communicate like we are able to do today, right? A messenger would take maybe a few days to come from one city to another, one place to another, yes? So after those 3-4 days, you have that person come and tell you, hey, listen, in Najaf, let's say you were living in Karbala, let's say. It takes you about, what, a day or two to walk? Okay. Let's say you were in Najaf. Somebody comes from Karbala, tells you, in Karbala, we saw the moon. طيب. What do you do at that point in time according to the riwayah? You have to redo that day. Why? Because between Najaf and Karbala, there's a small amount of distance. The distance is very, very small. Meaning you're within the same horizon. Yes? You're within the same horizon. Jameel. So the Imam alayhi salam is essentially saying that you don't have to necessarily see the moon yourself. If someone else sees the moon from another city, from a X distance away, which is not specified by the riwayah, you can go by their testimony. You can go by their sight, because your sight and their sight are essentially one, because you're looking at the same patch of sky. Jameel. Another riwayah, page 278, riwayah number 3. The Imam alayhi salam is asked by Ishaq ibn Ammar. قال سألت أبا عبد الله عليه السلام إمام الصادق عن هلال رمضان يغم علينا في 29 من شعبان. Essentially asks him the same thing. 29th of Shahr Ramadan, or 29th of Sha'ban rather. We don't see the moon. We don't see the moon in front of us. What do we do? فقال لا تصمه إلا أن تراه. Don't fast until you see it. فإن شهد أهل بلد أنهم رأوه فقده وإذا رأيته في وسط النهار فأتم صومه إلى الليل. Essentially the same exact riwayah. Saying what? If another group of people from another city see the moon, then go by their testimony. So the base for this idea of two sites being equal, two individuals from two different places looking at the same patch of sky, the fundamental idea is there in the riwayat. Now, there could be some more details mentioned in other riwayat. I myself, I don't have the capacity to present them, nor do I have the capacity to even go with one idea over another, or more or less give you a full bahath and research on this issue. Not at that level. But just to make it clear that this idea is mentioned in the riwayat. Jamil. What are the different opinions? Here are the different opinions. Historically speaking, the most famous idea, the most famous opinion is that of Ayatollah Sistani today, historically, before Sayyid al-Khou'i, which is what we call ta'addud al-ufuq. Essentially, that the horizon is small. That the horizon, that diameter, that radius is quite small. So between me and Windsor and Toronto, which is about 4 hours away, we are within the same horizon. Between me and Windsor and maybe Montreal, which is about 10 hours driving, we could fall within the same horizon. But between me and Najaf, it rarely ever happens. Rarely ever happens that we fall within the same horizon. Between myself and Australia, I don't think it's ever happened, right? And Windsor and Australia, rarely ever happens. So that diameter is very, very small. How do you calculate that diameter? Sayyid Sistani more or less gives us the method by which to calculate the diameter, and the diameter changes year to year. It depends on how high the moon is in the sky. Well, and if you think about it, let's say the moon is low in the sky. It means that diameter is going to be smaller. It means the diameter is going to be smaller. The amount of people that can see it is going to be less because it's low in the sky. It's low in the sky. Like if it's high in the sky, it means that diameter is going to be larger. So it depends on different factors, yes? This is the most famous idea, and it's called ta'addud al-ufuq. Ta'addud al-ufuq. And usually ulama that believe in ta'addud al-ufuq are those ulama that will have مثلا Najaf having Eid on one day, and then the other part of the world, the Western hemisphere of the world, will have Eid on the next day. Generally speaking, it's those ulama that have essentially 2 days of Eid. Why? Because if it's seen in Najaf, their circle is very small. So only the surrounding countries can break their fast in accordance to what Najaf saw for Eid. But if it's seen in Najaf, I can't break my fast here in Windsor. So I have to wait till the next day if I don't see the moon in my respective city. Jameel. Historically, this is the opinion that most of our ulama, many of the ulama at the very least, were, they actually believed in. Up until Sayyid al-Khou'i rahmatullahi alayhi came along. Sayyid al-Khou'i looked into this issue, and according to Sayyid al-Ruhani, he really delved into this issue, and he came up with an opinion that was there before. But he more or less based this opinion, gave it its core, and more or less made it famous. Made it famous. We say shayyadha. He made it strong. And that is what we call wahdat al-ufuq, having one horizon. What do we mean by one horizon? He says this. He says, if a city shares part of the night with another city around the world, wherever they may be in the world, then they are of one horizon, because their night is one. And if their night is one, then the horizon must be one, because the sun comes up for both of them and comes down for both of them. They share at least one part of the night. Therefore, they share the same horizon. It's night here, and it's night, for example, in London, England, meaning we share the same patch of sky. When they look up at the sky, it's dark. When I look up at the sky, it's dark. We share the same sky. Therefore, we share the same horizon. Taban. I'm like, this is super superficial. It's much deeper than this, but I'm trying to make it easier to understand. Sayyid al-Khou'i came forward and wrote an entire bahath in his Minhaj al-Salihin, and more or less revolutionized the way that we understand moon sighting. Now, is he the first person to come up with this idea? No. Sayyid al-Ruhani mentions 3 or 4 of our great ulama that have a similar idea. One of them being Shaykh al-Bahrani, another one being Sharif al-Radi or Sharif al-Murtada, and other ulama as well. So this idea was there, but Sayyid al-Khou'i more or less brought it about, presented it, made it famous, and gave it its base and fundamentals, and made it so that those that are listening and seeing Sayyid al-Khou'i understand where he's coming from and why he's saying what he's saying, and convinced many of the ulama. So you see, in today's modern day, most of the ulama, most of the maraja are on the opinion or a similar version of the opinion of Sayyid al-Khou'i. For example, Shaykh Wahid al-Khurasani, one of our greatest scholars, one of our greatest maraja, he comes and says they must share not a portion of the night, the majority of the night. The majority of the night. So let's say Windsor, Ontario, and England, London, England. They share 2 hours of the night, and the entire night for them is 8 hours. They can't break their fast on the same day. But Windsor, Ontario, let's say, and Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada. Between them, by plane, there's 4 or 5 hours. They share, let's say, 5 hours of the night, and the night is 8 hours. They can break their fast on the same day. Their sight are equal to each other. Okay? Their testimonies are equal to each other. Then we have on the total opposite end of the spectrum, Sheikh Bashir al-Najafi. He says if it's seen in one place on the entire globe, the entire globe has Eid. So if it's seen in Australia, the person up in Edmonton, Alberta can break their fast. If it's seen in the utmost western part of the world, the utmost eastern part of the world breaks their fast. This is Sheikh Bashir al-Najaf. Also a version of the work of Sayyid al-Khou'i, but with a little twist on it, as they say. Sayyid al-Hakim also says something very similar, but differentiates between the western hemisphere of the world and the eastern hemisphere of the world. No problem. I'm not going to get into the specifics. Why I'm telling you this, my brothers and sisters, because you yourself now can think and see where the difference of opinion comes from in terms of when Eid is. You yourself can think, and if you want, on the day before Eid, or in those 2 days that more or less there's a difference, try to apply the opinions of these scholars, and you're going to see essentially that for Sayyid Sistani, he must be on this day, he cannot be on that day. For Sayyid al-Khou'i, he must be before Sayyid Sistani because of his opinion and how it works and how it's applied. Yes? So the difference of opinion, my brothers and sisters, is not based solely on the riwayat, because one riwayah says this and another riwayah says this. It could be more or less on the understanding of the riwayah. Why I'm telling you this? Because there are some that come up and say, well, our maraja, as we said, are stuck in the past. Our maraja don't want to revolutionize. Our maraja are more or less just saying what the scholars before said. Well, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. The famous opinion was that of Sayyid Sistani. Today, Ta'addud al-Ufuq. Sayyid al-Khou'i comes and more or less revolutionizes the way our modern scholars look at moon sighting. Where now the majority of scholars, the majority of our maraja are on the opinion of Sayyid al-Khou'i or a version of it. So our maraja, my brothers and sisters, are not influenced by those that came before them to the degree where they have a bias. No. They more or less take from the work of those that came before them, add on to it. Just like universities take the work of the doctors, take the work of the scientists, researchers that came before, and add on to it so that they can move forward together. That's how our ulama work. That's how our ulama work. And that's why in the maktaba, in the library of one of the greatest scholars of the age, such as Sayyid al-Khou'i, he has the books of Shaykh Yusuf al-Bahrani, which was on a different level of fiqh altogether. He was an akhbari, while Sayyid al-Khou'i was an usuli, meaning they were from two different schools of thought. That he has his books, he takes his opinions, he looks into them, researches them, discusses them. Also with this, he has the opinions of those that came before him, al-mutaqaddim or al-mutaakhirin, those that were in the early stages of Islamic jurisprudence, the early stages of the progression and the growth of Islamic jurisprudence, and also has scholars that probably passed away a few years before him, like Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim, al-Mustamsak, his book al-Mustamsak ala al-Warud. So you find our ulama, my brothers and sisters, are much more open than the way me and you understand things. Much more open than how me and you perceive them to be, more or less. Much more open-minded. And when they come and present, They're presenting their findings in accordance to what is objective. They're objective findings, not subjective. Not what they believe in, what they think. They're depending on the riwayat, depending on their research, and ultimately giving us an opinion. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Jamil. Now that we understood this, the question is, when it comes to the testimony of when the moon is seen, that testimony, what are the opinions? Or, afwan, I'm so sorry. What are the conditions for that testimony to be accepted? What are those conditions? Sayyid Sistani, in his Minhaj al-Salihin, or al-Masail al-Muntakhaba, usually the ibarat, the words are more or less the same. Minhaj al-Salihin having a little bit more detail. He says, يثبت الهلال بالعلم الحاصل من الرؤية أو التواتر أو غيرهما. The moon of the month, the beginning of the month, becomes known or clear to a person through them seeing it, them actually seeing the moon. Or a person can begin the month when they actually see the moon they themselves. Or knowledge that comes from at-tawatur, أو غيرهما. What's at-tawatur? At-tawatur is more or less, when the people of the city are all on the same opinion, are all saying that the moon was seen, and there's no way that they can have the same opinion without actually seeing the moon itself. Meaning, you went to one side of the city, they said we saw the moon. You went to another side of the city, they said they saw the moon. And then there was no communication between the two. This is tawatur. وغيرهما وبالإطمئنان الحاصل من الشياع, and certainty that comes from the idea or from the opinion, from the issue becoming widespread within the city. Widespread, where everyone is getting ready for Eid tomorrow, right? You get into the city, you go to the city, you arrive at the city. Sorry, I'm just a little tired today, so the words are coming out sort of backwards. You arrive at the city at night, and you see the entire city getting ready for Eid tomorrow. That's shaya. It's known and widespread within the city. أو غيره من المناشئ العقلائية, and other methods as well. وبمضي 30 يوما كذا. And he also said وبشهادة عدلين, in the testimony of two just individuals. طيب, who are just individuals? What is a just individual within the Sharia? They define the just individual as a person who does the wajib, leaves the haram, and if they were to fall into haram, they repent. That is the just individual. So the religious person. Testimony of two religious just individuals. Jamil. When these two just men stand up and say, Wallah, we saw the moon, there is conditions that must apply to their testimony as well. They must testify for the exact same thing. What do I mean by the exact same thing? If one says, I saw it to the east, someone said, I saw it towards the west of the sky. They're both saying they saw it, but their testimony is their testimonies contradict each other in the details. One says he saw it in the east, one says he saw it in the west. If it was actually in the west, then the one who saw it in the east didn't actually see it. So we don't have two here. Yes? So the testimony must be one and the same in its details, and also in the fact that they saw the moon. Similarly, there can't be a testimony that goes against theirs. Let's say we had 100 people go up and try to see the moon. Out of the 100, only two people come and say we saw the moon. And those two people are not just udul, not just, they're scholars. More than that, they're scholars. They say, Wallah, we saw the moon. But the 98 say, no, we didn't see the moon. Like, why is it that you saw the moon? Why is it that you two only saw the moon? And 98 didn't see the moon. Their testimony is put aside. Their testimony is not taken. It's rejected. Why? Because there's a testimony standing against it. There is a testimony that is more or less saying, no, what they saw was not the moon. We have 98 other individuals to testify they didn't see the moon. So there can be a testimony opposite of theirs. There can be a testimony opposite of theirs. With this, my brothers and sisters, there's a long discussion of the conditions, when it's taken, when it's not taken. It's not for us. That's more or less for the ulama that are telling us that the moon was seen or not seen. And I'll tell you something. The ulama that are on that board that more or less takes the opinions of different parts of the North America, and even also the ulama that are in Europe, the night before Eid or 2 nights before Eid, they're scrambling, trying to get to me and you the correct opinion and when Eid is. So I ask of you guys, my brothers and sisters, 2 things. Number 1, pray for them. Number 2, be patient on them. It's not that they're scrambling because they don't know what's happening. No. They're trying to find the correct testimony, the testimony that works with what is actually going on, and a testimony that is not being contradicted by someone else's testimony. Be patient with them, my brothers and sisters. They know what they're doing. They are not trying to make you fast an extra day. That's not what they're trying to do. They'd rather break their fast early just as well, okay? They are trying to get for you and me, my brothers and sisters, the day of Eid in accordance to all of the conditions, so their dhimma in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their conscience in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clear, and they don't have anything on their shoulders. So bear with them. And if it comes to a point where there's doubt, fast the extra day. What's the problem with that? You have 29 days that you fasted or we fasted. We can't fast an extra day to be sure that we're not breaking any rules, right? Or if we can't fast an extra day, we can't fast extra day. We don't want to fast the extra day. Travel, break your fast and come back. And it's not makruh and it's not wrong. And we discussed this issue before. If not, we'll discuss it inshallah in the days to come بعون الله تعالى. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم أسأله تعالى أن يعفو عنا ويغفر لنا ويرحمنا إنه نعم المولى ونعم النصير وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين.